Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I introduce myself. This is Malaika, belongs to BS Chemistry Batch 4. This is my first presentation presented to Sir Hammad Majeed. The topic of my today's presentation is genetically modified foods. First of all, I explain my contents of this presentation. First is definition. In definition, we learn about the basic procedure, basic reactions of the formation of GM foods. In history, we discuss about the history of GM foods, in which we study how, where, and why GM foods came into existence. Firstly, which country introduced the GM foods, and then in process we learn which are the processes, which are the reactions occur to form a genetically modified food. Then we learn about, in the next content, GM crops. GM crops have basic certain properties than the other crops, and these crops hold some better characters in itself. For example, soy and rice. Then we learn about, in next content, health and safety of GM foods. In this content, we learn how the GM foods effect on the health of human lives, and we also learn GM foods will save for the human health. Then in the next content, we study about derivative products, means these products obtained from the basic products like vegetable oil. It is the derivative product, and it is produced from the ghee in the laboratory. Next, in the testing, in this content we learn how when a GM food is formed, and it is tested that the GM food have certain properties in itself that we want, and it is tested again and again to check the properties of the GM foods that it contain. Next, we learn about detection of the GM foods, and at last we learn about the conclusion. In conclusion, we study the GM foods have which kind of advantages and disadvantages for the human population. First of all, the first content which we explain is the definition of GM foods. Genetically modified foods are foods produced from organisms that have had changes introduced into their DNA using the methods of genetic engineering as opposed to traditional crossbreeding. According to World Health Organization, foods produced from or using GM organisms are often referred to as GM foods. History. Human directed genetic manipulation of food began with the domestication of plants and animals through artificial selection at about 500 to 1000 BC. With the discovery of DNA in the early 90s and various advancements in the genetic techniques through the 1970s, it became possible to directly alter the DNA and genes within food. Genetically modified microbial enzymes were the first application of genetically modified organisms in food production and were approved by US Food and Drug Administration. The genetically modified food approved for release was the flavor saver tomato in 1994. China was the first country to commercialize a transgenic crop in 1993 with the introduction of virus resistant tobacco. For many years, scientists worked on it. The most widely noted GMOs are designed to tolerate herbicides. By 2006, some wheat populations had evolved to tolerate some of the same herbicides. Palmer amaranth is a wheat that competes with cotton. Next is the process or procedure of GM foods. It is a multi-step process. First step is identify a useful gene from another organism. Means हम वो जीन जो है उस ऑर्गेनिज्म से लेते हैं. ऑर्गेनिज्म के अंदर जो जीन हम लोगों के लिए होता है जिसकी हम लोगों ने स्पेसिफिक करेक्टरिस्टिक्स इंट्रोड्यूस करवानी होती हैं जीएम फूड में, हम वो जीन आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं. Next, it can be taken from cell or artificially synthesized. It means that the gene or which have some specific kind of properties which we want to promote in the next generation of the GM food, we get this gene from a cell या फिर हम इसे आर्टिफिशली प्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं, आर्टिफिशली सिंथेसाइज कर सकते हैं इन दी लेबॉर्ट्री. थर्ड स्टेप इज then combine with other genetic material. It means that the gene of interest is combined with the other genetic material. Fourth, then genetic elements are inserted into the target's genome. It means the target genome which show the properties of that gene who inserted in the genetic material, then inserted into the target gene which show the properties of that gene. Fifth is further testing using PCR, Southern hybridization and DNA sequences is conducted to confirm. It means that after the procedure we want to confirm that the gene is basically contain all the properties which we want. That's why the testing by using different methods is performed. Next is genetically modified crops. First is soy. Soybeans accounted for half of all genetically modified crops planted in 2014. Genetically modified soybean has been modified to tolerate herbicides and produce healthier oils. In 2015, 94% of soybean acreage in the US was genetically modified to be glyphosate tolerant. Next is rice. Golden rice is the most well-known GM crop that is aimed at increasing nutrient value. It has been engineered with 3 genes that biosynthesis beta-carotene, a precursor of vitamin A in the edible parts of rice. It is intended to produce a fortified food to be grown and consumed in areas with a shortage of dietary vitamin A deficiency which each year is estimated to kill 670,000 children under the age of 5 and cause an additional 500,000 cases of irreversible childhood blindness. Next is the health and safety of GM foods. There is a scientific consensus that currently available food derived from GM crops poses no greater risk to human health than conventional food, but that each GM food needs to be tested on a case by case basis before introduction. Next is derivative products. Vegetable oil. Most vegetable oils used in the US is produced from GM crops, canola, corn, cotton, and soybean. Vegetable oil is sold directly to consumers as cooking oil, shortening, and margarine and is used in prepared foods. There is a vanishingly small amount of protein or DNA from original crop in vegetable oil. Vegetable oils is made of triglyceride extracted from plants or seeds and then refined and may be further processed via hydrogenation to turn liquid oils into solid ions. Refining remove all the non-triglycerides from the oil. Next is testing of GM foods. The legal and regulatory status of GM foods varies by country, with some nations banning or restricting them and others permitting them with widely differing degrees of regulation. Countries such as United States, Canada, Lebanon, and Egypt use substantial equivalence to determine if further testing is required, while many other countries such as China, Brazil, and European Union only authorize GMO cultivation a case by case basis. Next is the testing of GM foods. Testing on GMOs in food and feed is routinely done using molecular techniques such as PCR and bioinformatics. In the next content, we discuss a sketch in which we study about some basic characteristics of GM foods. For example, first is the tolerant resistant crops means this contains the ability to fight with the pests, diseases, drought, frost, and floods. Next is the more food means with the help of GM foods technique we produce more and more food which contain some certain characteristics in itself. Next is cheaper food means the food which is produced by the genetically modification is contain properties and it is cheaper in itself. Next is the reduced risk means it reduces the risk of bad effect on the human health. Next is increased nutrition, means the population which increase day by day and the balance which disturbs due to the increase of human health of food cycle is maintained by the production of GM foods by the genetically modification method. Next is edible vaccines, means with the help of genetically modification technique we able to use edible vaccines. Next is reducing world hunger and improving world health, means the genetically modified food have the characteristics in itself that reduce the human world hunger and it maintain the balance of the human world population which increased and the food and the relation between the food and human is balanced and it also improve the health of the world, means it does not have any specific bad effects on the human health. At last, in this presentation, we discuss about the conclusion. In conclusion, genetically modified foods have enormous potential to save money, eliminate poverty, reduce hunger and malnutrition, and promote innovative practices. Some individuals believe GM foods infringe on the environment and human health. However, I believe these concerns are de-minimized and unwarranted. Thank you.